The one thing nobody tells you about empaths is that there's a documented psychological pattern Jung identified that either destroys you completely or transforms you into something he called dangerously whole. If you don't know this, you'll keep wondering why your sensitivity feels like both a curse and a calling. But once you understand it, you'll realize you're not broken at all. You're undergoing what Jung termed the necessary death before becoming. I'm going to show you exactly what Jung discovered about people who absorb everything around them, plus the 4 distinct phases he mapped, and why only some empaths survive the final transformation. And the most important part? The integration technique Jung used on himself when he nearly lost his mind to this very pattern. I'm revealing that toward the end. But first, you need to understand why Jung called this pattern dangerous, because without this context, you might give up right before your breakthrough. The case that revealed this began with a woman Jung treated in 1913, right as he was descending into his own confrontation with the unconscious. Jung noticed something that shattered his assumptions about sensitivity and psychological survival. This woman arrived at his office unable to enter rooms with more than 2 people. She described feeling invaded by everyone's inner weather. Their anger felt like her anger. Their sadness became her sadness. Their unspoken resentments lodged in her chest like physical objects. But here's what made this case different from everything Jung had seen before. She wasn't simply anxious or avoiding social situations out of fear. She was actually accurate. Jung tested this carefully, disguising his own emotional states during sessions. She identified his concealed frustration, his hidden excitement about a recent discovery, even his worry about a family member he'd never mentioned. Her accuracy rate was unsettling. Jung realized he wasn't treating a woman with overactive imagination. He was witnessing what he would later call undifferentiated consciousness, a psyche with permeable boundaries that literally absorb the psychological material of others. Now here's where it gets interesting. Jung began documenting similar cases and found a pattern that terrified him. Roughly 60% of people with this trait experienced complete psychological collapse before age 40. They either retreated entirely from society, developed severe physical illnesses that had no medical explanation, or fragmented into what looked like personality disorders. But here's the part that will surprise you. The remaining 40%? They became what Jung privately called the wounded healers, individuals with an almost supernatural ability to facilitate transformation in others. They could see straight through psychological defenses, sense the exact moment someone was ready for truth, and hold space for emotional experiences that would overwhelm ordinary therapists. What neuroscience has revealed about this process changes everything. Modern research shows that some individuals have what's called hyperactive mirror neuron systems. These neural structures don't just help us understand others. In hyperactive states, they literally fire as if we're experiencing what we're observing. Your brain doesn't fully distinguish between their pain and your pain. This isn't metaphorical sensitivity. It's neurological reality. Jung wrote, "The empath carries no shield between self and world. They stand naked in a storm of others' becoming, and this nakedness either kills them or makes them holy." But that's just the surface level. Wait until you see what happens when an empath encounters what Jung called the collective shadow, the accumulated darkness that groups of people suppress together. Think about walking into a family gathering where everyone's smiling, but you feel crushing despair. If you can identify the specific texture of that despair, the resentment between the couple in the corner, the grief the grandmother is performing happiness over, the teenager's suicidal thoughts hidden behind jokes, you were experiencing hyperactive mirroring in real time. And this explains something that most people never realize. Empaths don't just feel more, they feel what's hidden. They detect the gap between presentation and reality, and their nervous system responds to the reality, not the presentation. This is why you can feel exhausted by positive people who are suppressing rage, and energized by someone honestly expressing sadness. Stop and think about this for a second. Right now, as you're hearing this, you might be recognizing yourself in this description. And if you are, you've probably spent years wondering if something's wrong with you. You've likely been called too sensitive, overly emotional, or told to toughen up. Everything I just explained. Most people miss the deeper implication. The world wasn't gaslighting you out of cruelty. People genuinely cannot perceive what you perceive. To them, you're overreacting to nothing. But you're not reacting to nothing. You're reacting to everything they've learned not to see. Jung identified 4 distinct phases empaths move through, but here's what terrified him most. You can't skip phases, and each one carries a specific danger that stops most people permanently. Phase 1. The unconscious empath. In this phase, you absorb everything, but don't realize what's happening. You think everyone experiences life this way. You walk into a room and feel suddenly anxious, but you assume the room is objectively anxiety-producing. Someone shares a story, and you feel their emotions so completely that you cry. But you think you're just really compassionate. Jung wrote, "The unconscious empath is a leaf in every wind, moved by forces they cannot name, drowning in waters they do not see." Here's a real example. A client of Jung's described going to the market and coming home unable to get out of bed for 2 days. She thought she was physically ill. Jung had her reconstruct the market visit in detail. She'd passed a woman who'd just discovered her husband's affair. She'd stood near a vendor whose child had died the month before. She'd brushed against a man planning suicide that evening. Her body had absorbed all of it, processed all of it, and collapsed under weight she didn't know she was carrying. But here's what nobody tells you about this phase. It can feel like the safest phase because you haven't yet recognized how different you are. Ignorance provides a buffer. Once you move to phase 2, you can never return to this innocence. And many people experience the transition as a kind of death. Phase 2, the awakened empath. Now you realize what's happening. You recognize that you're picking up on others' emotions, that your moods aren't always your own, that you have access to information that shouldn't be available. This should feel empowering, but Jung observed something disturbing. This is the most dangerous phase. Now watch what happens when an empath becomes conscious of their gift without having boundaries or integration practices. They either become completely overwhelmed and retreat from all human contact, or they become addicted to their ability and lose themselves entirely. Jung documented case after case of newly awakened empaths who stopped being able to identify their own feelings. "I don't know what I want," they'd say, "because I want what everyone around me wants." Or they'd become martyrs, sacrificing everything to manage others' emotions, slowly erasing themselves in service of keeping everyone else comfortable. And the pattern gets even more disturbing. Phase 2 empaths often develop what Jung called the savior complex. They believe that because they can feel others' pain, they must fix it. They enter relationships with deeply wounded people, convinced their empathic abilities make them uniquely qualified to heal them. They pour themselves into black holes of need, wondering why they're exhausted, why nothing they do is ever enough. Phase 3. The bounded empath. This is where you've learned to distinguish between your emotions and absorbed emotions. You've developed what Jung called permeable boundaries, flexible enough to still perceive, strong enough to not be destroyed by what you perceive. But Phase 3 holds a secret that Jung almost didn't publish. He discovered that to develop these boundaries, empaths must go through what he termed the great refusal. You must practice feeling someone's pain and choosing not to fix it. You must sit with someone's anger and not absorb it. You must witness suffering and remain centered in your own being. This feels, to most empaths, like becoming cruel. Every fiber of your being screams that if you can feel it, you must heal it. Your entire identity might be built around being the person who helps, who understands, who's always available. Phase 3 requires you to let that identity die. You must become willing to be misunderstood, to be called selfish, to disappoint people who've come to rely on your boundaryless availability. Jung wrote, "The empath's greatest act of courage is not feeling everything. It is choosing what to feel, when to feel it, and having the strength to set down pain that is not theirs to carry. One of Jung's students described her Phase 3 transition like this: "I was at a dinner party and suddenly felt my friend's rage at her partner. Before, I would have absorbed it, taken her aside, tried to help. Instead, I just noted it. Oh, she's angry, and returned to my own experience. I felt like I was abandoning her. But the next day, she called me to process it herself. She didn't need me to feel it for her. She needed to feel it herself." Understanding these phases is crucial, but there's one more thing you need to know before we get to Phase 4. If this matches your experience, pause and drop "I see everything" in the comments right now. Now, everything I just told you, there's one exception that changes everything. Some people skip directly from Phase 1 to Phase 3 through trauma. A betrayal so profound, an abandonment so complete, that their empathic gifts shut down overnight. They build walls so thick that nothing gets through. This looks like Phase 3 because there are boundaries, but it's actually what Jung called the false integration. Boundaries built from wounds rather than wisdom. These empaths often believe they've transcended their sensitivity. They pride themselves on not caring anymore. But Jung warned that false integration always collapses eventually, usually catastrophically, because it's built on suppression rather than genuine transformation. But Jung uncovered something that goes even deeper, and this is where most people completely misunderstand empathic abilities. The gift isn't feeling others' emotions. That's just the mechanism. The actual gift is what those feelings reveal about the collective unconscious, the shared psychological patterns that shape human behavior beneath conscious awareness. Here's what transformed Jung's entire understanding. He realized that empaths aren't just picking up individual emotions. They're sensing archetypal patterns playing out through individuals. When you feel someone's rage, you're not just feeling their personal anger. You're tapping into the eternal human experience of rage, the archetype of the destroyer moving through that particular person in that particular moment. Jung wrote, "The true empath becomes a living receiver for the gods themselves, the eternal patterns that move through mortal lives like wind through grass." This creates what Jung termed the empathic burden of consciousness. Once you perceive at this level, you can't unsee it. You watch people reenact the same dramas that humans have enacted for millennia. You see someone falling into the hero's journey, and you know exactly what comes next. You witness someone possessed by the shadow, and you can predict their self-destruction. But the most dangerous aspect? I'm saving that for just a moment. Because when you can see the patterns, you face a terrible temptation, the belief that seeing gives you the right to intervene. You think, if I can see they're about to sabotage this relationship, shouldn't I warn them? If I can sense this person is dangerous, shouldn't I protect others? Jung watched empaths destroy relationships, careers, and their own sanity by acting on perceptions that others couldn't verify. And here's the part that will really change how you see this. Your empathic accuracy doesn't give you narrative authority over others' lives. You might correctly sense that someone is lying, but you don't know why they're lying, what lying means in their developmental journey, or whether exposing the lie serves their growth or derails it. This is the empathic paradox. You see truly, but incompletely. You perceive fragments of a larger story you'll never fully know. Now here's where it becomes critical. The empathic gift can become its own form of tyranny if misused. Jung wrote, "The empath who mistakes perception for wisdom becomes the most dangerous kind of fool, convinced of their rightness by the accuracy of their sensing, blind to the limits of their knowing." Here are the signs, and pay close attention to number 3, because this one catches almost everyone. First, you start keeping score of how often you're right. You remember the times you sensed someone was lying and were proven correct. You catalog your accurate predictions. You build a case for your perceptive superiority. This is your ego colonizing your gift, turning a capacity for sensing into a source of specialness. Second, you become attached to others confirming your perceptions. You feel frustrated, even angry, when someone denies what you've sensed about them. You need them to admit you were right. You need validation. that you're not crazy. This is your gift turning into a trap. You're now dependent on others acknowledging your reality to feel secure in it. Third, and this is crucial, you start using your perceptions to control situations. You sense someone's about to make a choice you think is wrong, so you manipulate circumstances to prevent it. You feel someone's pulling away from you, so you create situations that force intimacy. You detect inauthenticity, so you engineer scenarios to expose it. You've gone from perceiving to playing God. But there's a way to avoid all of these traps. The path forward is what Jung described as the integration of opposites, learning to hold your empathic perception alongside humility about its limits. And this brings us to the most important piece. Before I show you phase 4, let me ask you something. What if your empathic gift isn't meant to help you fix others? What if it's meant to help you understand yourself? Because what I'm about to share changed everything for Jung himself when he was drowning in his own empathic overwhelm. Remember what I said at the beginning about the pattern that either destroys you or transforms you? Here's the truth that Jung discovered. Every emotion you perceive in another person, every shadow pattern you detect, every unspoken pain you sense, it's illuminating something that exists within you. Not because you caused it, or they're projecting it onto you, but because the human psyche contains all possibilities. Jung wrote, "I am not disturbed by what I perceive in you. I am disturbed by what your condition awakens in me, the part of my own psyche that resonates at that frequency." This is phase 4, the integrated empath. At this stage, you recognize that your empathic gift is actually a mirror showing you the entirety of your own psychological landscape. The rage you sense in others reveals your own capacity for rage. The grief you feel in a room shows you your own unprocessed losses. The deception you detect reflects the ways you're not being truthful with yourself. This is why empaths often have the most complex inner worlds. You're not just dealing with your own psychological material. Your gift constantly activates every corresponding pattern within you. But there's one final piece that ties everything together. Phase 4, empaths stop trying to heal others and start using their perceptions for what Jung called the great work, the integration of their own psyche. Every person becomes a teacher. Every difficult emotion becomes a doorway. Every pattern you perceive becomes an invitation to examine that pattern within yourself. Now that you understand this revelation, here's exactly how to apply it. In relationships, when you sense something off in your partner, instead of immediately addressing what you perceive in them, ask yourself, what in me is resonating with this frequency? What part of my own psyche is this activating? And here's the mistake most people make in this context. They think this means ignoring red flags or excusing harmful behavior. It doesn't. It means you address the external situation from a place of internal clarity rather than from your activated wound. You can still set boundaries, still make clear requests, still leave if needed, but you do it as a conscious choice rather than a reaction to your overwhelm. In professional settings, when you walk into a room and feel the tension, the unspoken conflicts, the performance of harmony over chaos, you use it differently. Instead of trying to smooth things over, to manage everyone's emotions, to fix the dysfunction, you note what the collective energy is teaching you about group dynamics, about power, about what happens when truth goes underground. You become a student of human nature rather than its custodian. But watch what happens when you combine this with the practice Jung developed for himself during his darkest period. He called it active imagination. When you sense something powerful in another person, you sit in meditation and imagine that quality as a figure within yourself. You dialogue with it. You ask it what it wants, what it's protecting, what it needs from you. In social situations, when you're absorbing the emotional field around you, you practice what Jung termed conscious suffering. You feel what's present without trying to change it. You let the sadness be sad, the anger be angry, the fear be afraid. You breathe, you ground, you maintain your center while the storm moves through you. You recognize that your capacity to feel it doesn't make you responsible for fixing it. Jung wrote, "The integrated empath becomes a hollow bone, open enough for everything to pass through, strong enough not to collapse under its passage." Now, remember, your empathic gift reflects both ways. Every judgment you make about others' emotional immaturity illuminates your own developmental edges. Every time you're frustrated by someone's lack of self-awareness, you're being shown where you're still unconscious. Every pattern of dysfunction you detect in others exists somewhere in the architecture of your own psyche. And this leads to the final transformation. The true purpose of understanding empathic abilities isn't to become a better helper, a more skilled therapist, or even a more compassionate friend. It's to achieve what Jung called psychological wholeness, the integration of every aspect of the human experience within your own being. Jung wrote, "The empath's curse becomes their blessing the moment they realize I am not broken because I feel everything. I feel everything because I am being forged into wholeness." This consciousness fundamentally shifts how you move through the world. Instead of being exhausted by others' emotions, you become curious about what they're teaching you about yourself. You walk into a room of anger and think, here's an opportunity to explore my relationship with rage. You encounter someone's deep grief and recognize, this is showing me where I still need to grieve. Instead of feeling responsible for managing the emotional climate around you, you trust that everyone is on their own journey. You offer presence without interference, compassion without rescue, witness without fixing. Instead of seeing your sensitivity as a burden that isolates you, you recognize it as the mechanism through which you're achieving a depth of self-knowledge that most people never access. One of Jung's final students, a woman who spent 20 years moving from phase 1 to phase 4, described it like this: "I used to walk through the world like I was bleeding from 1,000 cuts, wounded by everyone's pain. Now I walk through the world like a mountain with 1,000 streams running through it. The water moves through me, shapes me, teaches me, but I am not the water. I am what the water reveals." And this brings us full circle to Jung's own journey. Remember the woman who couldn't enter rooms with more than 2 people? After 3 years of working with Jung's integration methods, here's what happened. She developed what Jung called conscious permeability. She could still sense everything in a room, but she'd learned to create internal space around the perceptions. She practiced dialoguing with the emotions she absorbed, asking them what aspect of her own psyche they were illuminating. She stopped trying to heal everyone and started using her gift as a mirror. The last time Jung saw her, she'd become a teacher working with large groups. She described being able to feel the collective emotional field without being destroyed by it, using what she sensed to guide her work while maintaining her own center. Jung wrote about her, "She no longer drowns in the ocean of collective emotion. She has learned to swim, and in swimming, discovered she was always meant for these waters." This embodies Jung's discovery: the empathic gift is not a design flaw to be corrected, but an initiatory ordeal meant to forge you into psychological completeness. So let me answer the question I posed at the very beginning. Why is the empathic pattern dangerous? Because it forces you to confront the entirety of human experience, the beauty and the horror, the light and the shadow, the sublime and the profane, without the protective buffers that most people maintain. You can't unsee what you see. You can't unfeel what you feel. But why does it transform some people into something extraordinary? Because that confrontation, if you survive it, integrates you at a level that ordinary consciousness can't reach. You become whole not by transcending the difficult parts of existence, but by learning to hold all of it simultaneously. Your empathic nature isn't a disorder to be medicated, a sensitivity to be toughened up, or a burden to be endured. It's an invitation to the most demanding and rewarding psychological work a human can undertake. You're not too sensitive for this world because you feel others' pain. You're being sensitized by this world to achieve a depth of understanding that serves your own becoming. The real question was never, how do I stop being so empathic? The real question is, how do I use this gift to become psychologically whole? And the answer is this: you stop trying to heal others with your perceptions and start using those perceptions to illuminate, integrate, and transform yourself. Jung's integration method offers a bridge from empathic overwhelm to empathic mastery, from drowning in others' emotions to using those emotions as a map of your own inner territory. You were born to feel deeply, not to become everyone's therapist or emotional custodian, but to achieve a level of self-knowledge that requires feeling the full spectrum of human experience. Your empathic gift isn't your burden. Your resistance to your empathic gift, your belief that it makes you broken, your attempt to be normal when you were designed for wholeness, that's your burden. You're not too much for this world. You're precisely what Jung called the wounded healer, someone whose sensitivity, once integrated, becomes a source of profound wisdom. If Jung's description of the empath's journey mirrors your experience, you're part of a lineage of individuals who've always existed at the edges, feeling too much, seeing too clearly, carrying the collective emotional reality that others can ignore. Share below which phase describes your current journey. Subscribe for deeper explorations of Jung's insights into psychological transformation, shadow work, and the integration of wounded gifts. Ready for more? Watch my video on Jung's concept of the wounded healer, where I uncover the specific practices he used to transform psychological damage into therapeutic power. Thank you for being here. Until we meet again in the depths.